Sound of Arunda's prognostication of poetry and the possible line of future poetry, the subjective turn, a greater and greater turn to subjectivity, that is one. And then a more knocking at the higher consciousness, a dealing with nature, not as it was done in the past through sensation or through emotion or through reaction of the aesthetic mind, but perhaps by a soul sight, by soul trying to use the apparatus of sensation. That was general line which we laid down. And then he also gave the five great lights which poetry has to work under: the sun of truth, poetic truth; the sun of beauty and delight; third is the greater breath of life; and the spirit in man working directly. So we have got five suns of poetry to illumine her sky, and it is from there that she will delight. And he pointed out more pertinently that delight and beauty is really the central driving inspirational force of high poetry. True poetry would be one that is moved by delight and beauty, not so much even by truth or by life or by the spirit. Delight and beauty should be the central guiding force of any high poetry. And if it rises to that, the language also will undergo a corresponding change. The form will undergo a change, and the form will be the form which the soul directly, finds to express itself in language. That is what we saw yesterday. And we wanted also to see how this reading of possible line of development of poetry with the poets of the dawn and the forerunners, you see, making out, so to say, points of light toward the future. In fact, you can even see poets of the dawn, the forerunners, and then modern poets, topped by Aurobindo and people of that category of creative capacity. You see, so it gives you three lines of light, so to say, showing the not only possibility but actual condition in which this impulse is finding expression in modern poetry. We take up some of the modernists now. We will not take up just now the up-to-date modernists. We will take some of the forerunners, AE and so on, so as to illustrate a little more in detail the trend which he has given. Now, if you take AE, where is AE? Yes, there is AE. You see, I'll give an illustration from AE, which only one passage just to show how even the ordinary phenomenon or a landscape description of nature is surcharged with something of the interpretation of the soul. He is looking at a village, in which this smoke rises in the evening, the smoke rises in the evening in the villages. And that goes, sometimes if the air is quiet, it goes straight into the sky, isn't it? Yes. Well, it is that phenomenon which he is describing. He is not describing anything romantic or wonderful. Dust wrapped the village in its dim caress. It was evening time. Dusk wrapped the village in its dim caress. Each chimney's vapor, like a thin grey rod, mounting aloft miles of quietness, pillars the skies of God. You see? Now there you get, he is only describing perhaps an evening scene in a village where the chimney fires or chimney smokes are rising straight. And then you can see here, like thin grey rod mounting through miles of quietness, so that it is not merely empty space through which it is passing, where an cosmonaut is circulating around the earth, but it is mounting through miles of quietness. So a subjective rendering of the atmosphere above the sky, you see, it is the subjective rendering. It's a seeing of the soul, the inner sight is seen, mounting aloft through miles of quietness, pillars the skies of God. So that the chimney rods are, as it were, pillars that support the sky. And then in the suggestion that is implied is that as the rods support the skies of God, the whole thing becomes like a temple, you see, like a church. You see, it is, yes, that's it. The suggestion goes further if you can feel the suggestion. So you can see that even in a description of an ordinary phenomenon of nature, the poet is able to bring it, bring the whole outlook of something quite different from what nature is externally to the senses. Now here, further up, of course, he works out that in two more stanzas, but that will take us too long time. So I won't take that, you see. We take, now you take W.B. Yeats. Now Yeats is a very well-known writer. And I quoted that verse yesterday with bits of it, but the whole poem is like this. The Rose in My Heart, that is the title, I think. All things uncomely and broken, all things worn out and old, the cry of a child by the roadway, the creak of a lumbering cart, the heavy step of the ploughman, flashing the wintry mold, are wronging your image that blossoms a rose in the deeps of my heart. Now he is imagining a world of beauty created by the divine. And he says that I have an image of this perfect creation, and all things uncomely and broken, all things worn out and old, like the cry of the child by the roadway. It is uncomely, and it is something that shouldn't happen. Yes, the creak of the lumbering cart, it should work in rhythm. Instead of that, it is creaking. The heavy steps of the plowman splashing the wintry mold are wronging. They commit a wrong. You see, they insult the image or they commit some fault against the perfect image that blossoms like a rose in the deep of my heart. The perfection of creation, which I have in my mind, is wronged by all ugly and uncomely things. The wrong of unshapely things is a wrong too great to be told. I hunger to build them anew and sit on a green knoll apart. With all earth and the sky and waters remade like a casket of gold, for my dream of your image that blossoms a rose in the deeps of my heart. Now, you see, he says that I am longing to recreate a perfect world out of the elements that are here around. Because the wrong of the unshapely things that are not beautiful, is too wrong to be put in language. And therefore he wants to rebuild the world with the earth and the sky and the waters. Like a casket of gold, he wants to make the whole world again. Because the dream that he has is like a rose, perfect, expression of beauty, which I have a conception of a divine world, divine beauty. Well, I want to recreate the world in the image of the divine beauty which I have in my heart. Now there you see the impulse of which Aurobindo speaks is finding expression in writings which you find. There are others, of course, in WBH, there are plenty of them. You have hardly time to go through all of them. We take Meredith next. In Meredith, we find in one of his poems, Lark Ascending, he says, he drops, the lark drops the silver chain of sound. He drops the silver chain of sound of many links without a break. And then after some lines he says, was never voice of ours could say our inmost in the sweetest way. Was never voice of our could say our inmost in the sweetest way. The inmost expression of what we feel inside and the way of expression sweetest, like the lark that he is able to do. We want the key of this of his wild note of truthful in a tuneful throat, truthful in a tuneful throat, a song seraphically free of taint of personality, so pure that it salutes the suns, the voice of one for millions, in whom the millions rejoice for giving that their spirit voice. Now this is a description of a lark that was rising, lark ascending. That's the title of the poem. It's one of the heights in English poetry. You see, lark ascending. Now in the lark ascending, what he finds is that he dropped the silver chain of sound without a break, and the voice that he carries is something that carries the inmost of the lark in the sweetest way. The human being is not able to voice his inmost in the sweetest way. That's one. And therefore he says, we want to learn this key, this art, the secret of this wild note, which is truthful and tuneful. You see? Truth that is without beauty and rhythm. Seraphically free from taint of personality. There is no idea of expressing his ego or himself. The lark, when it sings, it is free from the taint of personality, which all human expression in 99 cases are. And it is so pure that it salutes the sun. It is able to be, well, on a par with the greatest natural phenomenon, like the rising of the sun. The song of the lark, a small thing in the cosmos or universe, that it is able to salute the suns, and it becomes a voice of one for millions. It expresses the joy of life of the millions that are in the world, isn't it? It's the joy of one. And when the millions rejoice for giving their spirit voice, well, the poet, when he is able to sing free from the taint of personality, the poet also would be able to become the voice of one for millions. He would be one man singing, but the voice will be of the millions whom he represents, you see. As the lark is able to represent the joy of the world and cosmos, the poet also would be able to become the voice of one for the millions. And millions would rejoice because it is their spirit's voice, you see. That was one of, what was it? It was Meredith, no? Yes, Meredith, yes. Now, Stephen Phillip, if you take, you see, from the old list that we had, what was the Meredith? Something left out of Meredith? Let me just see. There is one more of Meredith, for instance, which is quoted in the in future poetry. He is dreaming of a perfect world like W.B. Yeats, and he says, "The wild plucked out of them, the unlovely slain, not forfeiting the beast with which they are crossed, to stature of the gods they shall attain. They shall uplift their earth to meet her Lord, themselves the attuning chord." Now, here he gained expression to a possible dream of perfection which he has, that in that world which he conceives a world of perfection. I think this from the hymn to color. I'm not sure, but hymn to color, I think this quotation is from there. And he says that the wild will be plucked out of the cosmos, of the creation, the unlovely slain, and even the beasts that remain will partake of the perfection and beauty of that creation. And then man will rise to the stature of the gods, and they shall uplift the earth to meet her Lord. They will so change this earth that earth will be able to rise to meet the divine, themselves the attuning chord, and they themselves will be able to become the chord that attune to the divine song or to the music of the divine life. You see? Now, there you get an expression which shows that even Meredith, though a great worshipper of, a worshipper of reason, in fact, Meredith is one in whom the the faith is at the weakest point because he's a believer in reason. You see, Meredith is almost a poet who has raised a temple to reason, human reason. He is a worshipper of human reason. He thinks that is the highest faculty, a divine faculty. In fact, it is divine, but not the top faculty of man. But he has sung of the, reason is our greatest. What he says about reason? Reason is to him something like a divine thing, you see. He says, she is the world's one prize, our champion rightly head, the vessel whose piloted prow, though folly froth round hiss and hood, leaves a legible print on the keel. Reason, mirror of earth and guide to the holies from sense withheld. Reason, man's germinant fruit, a relentless quencher of lies. Relentless quencher of lies. That is his conception of reason, you see. Oh, he is mad about reason, you see. And still, what is interesting is to find that he who worships reason like that, he has in him, something which is almost contradictory to his worship of reason. Now, how does he say that? You see? Last, I think, is yes. It is meditation under the stars. One poem called Meditation Under the Stars by Meredith. He says, and earth, our blood-warm earth, a shuddering play to that frigidity of brainless ray. He is looking at the stars, under the stars. Earth, our blood-warm earth, a shuddering play to that frigidity of brainless ray. Ray that is coming here is brainless, you see, without human consciousness. And love is asked for love's wherefore. It's earth's, her gift. Else have we not. Except love, we have nothing else to give. Let it be the Lord of mind to guide our eyes. Let it but be the Lord of mind to guide our eyes. Let mind guide our sight. But fortified by day to penetrate black midnight. In the day, let us penetrate black midnight. See, hear, feel outside the senses. Even that we, the specks on dust upon the mold of mold, we who reflect those rays, though low our place, to them are lastingly allied. To the stars we are lastingly allied. So may we read and little find them cold, not frosty lamps illumining dead space, not distant aliens, not senseless powers. The fire is in them whereof we are born. The music of their motion may be ours. Even Meredith, with his worship of reason, is almost able to rise to a plane where he feels not only unity of the whole material world, but unity of consciousness from the stars to the earth. You see, what he is telling is, let us penetrate by day to penetrate the black midnight, midnight of ignorance, and with the light of reason, let us try to penetrate into what is this cosmos which sends us the light of the stars. You see, if you penetrate, he says, then we will see, hear and feel outside our senses, because we will see with our reason and not with our senses only. And if we see with our reason, then you will see that we, who are the specks on dust upon a mold of mold, earth is a mold, upon that is the growth of the life is another mold, and man is the dust upon that mold. Well, we are specks of dust upon a mold of mold. We who reflect those rays, because earth reflects the rays of light that fall upon the sun. fall from the sun. Though lower place, we are not as high and as big as the stars or the sun. To them are lastingly allied. Still we are related to the stars, to the heavenly bodies, to the galaxies. Now that establishment of relation is due to our perception of reason, he says. That if we rationally look without being limited by our sense evidence, we will see that even though man is insignificant and small and infinitesimal, man is connected with the most distant star in the galaxy. And so we may read and little find them cold, then we will find that they are not cold because they are related to us and we are full of life. They cannot be therefore dead. If we are related to the stars, if we are related to the other constellations in the galaxy or in the heaven interstellar space, then they cannot be completely dead, inert, unconscious. They are related to us, and as we are living, they must have some life. Otherwise, we can't have any relation with them. So it says, so we may read and little find them cold, not frosty lamps. Lamps working in frost, you see, not frosty lamps illuminating dead space. Only unnecessarily lighted up in space without any life. Not distant aliens, some foreign element with which we have nothing relation, but not senseless powers. The fire is in them whereof we are born. The fiery element in the heavenly bodies is the heat that has given rise to life on earth. The music of their spheres, of their motion may be ours. And probably the harmonic expression of motion which is in them well also might someday belong to us. Now that gives you some idea of how we are related to the other bodies in the earth. Is it Stephen Phillips? We have not taken Stephen Phillips, no? No. Stephen Phillips is better represented here. He has written two poems only, Marpessa and Christ in Hades. There are two poems by this man, Stephen Phillips. He was a Welsh, I think he was a Welshman. Welsh. And he has written this. Marpessa is a feminine character who was asked by Zeus or some great god. I think it was the sun is called, what is it called? It's called in Greek mythology, sun is called Apollo. Apollo asked to choose whether you want an immortal lover or a mortal lover. That is the subject matter, you see. I think Apollo or some god asked her whether she wants to take a human lover or a god lover, divine lover, and that is the subject matter. And then you see, she chooses a human lover perhaps, and that's the subject matter.
Excuse me, but how do you spell? What's the name of this?
Marpessa. Marpessa. You will find it difficult to get the book, but you may, some good bookseller who. Pessa, yes. Stephen Phillips. And she decides whether she would take to herself a brief or an eternal lover. That's how, you see, the subject matter works out. And there he is expressing the poet is expressing through the character morning scene, you see. The grateful upward look of earth emerging roseate from her bath of dew. Now there you see, the earth has only, it is morning and life is, the earth is full of dew and so on. But he is looking at this, the earth was living. The grateful upward look of earth emerging roseate from her bath of dew. Now there you find that earth has taken her bath and she has come out, with a grateful look, emerging roseate, coming out with a beauty and looking at the sun, looking at the world, perhaps or cosmos or perhaps the sun. Grateful upward look. Now this endowing, material, object or perception of sense with psychology, with life, and with a significance and with a perception, almost, widening the whole of human range of consciousness. That's one. And then he is referring to that poem which Sharundas quoted also in future poetry, this one. And he is telling now Marpesa, this character that is, not only for thy body packed with June, that jar of violet wine set in the air, nor for that stirring bosom that besieged by drowsing lovers o'er thy perilous hair, nor for that face that might indeed provoke invasion of old cities. Like Helen. Yes, he's referring to that, you see. Not for that face that might indeed provoke invasion of old cities. No. Nor all that freshness stealing on me like strange sleep. Not only for this do I love thee, but because infinity upon thee broods, and thou art full of whispers and of shadows. Thou meanest what the sea has striven to say so long, and yearned up to the cliffs to tell. Thou art what all the winds have uttered not, what the still night suggesteth to the heart. Thy voice is like music heard ere birth, some spirit lute touched on a spirit sea. Thy face remembered is from other worlds. It has been died for, though I know not when. It has been sung for, though I know not where. Beside thee, I am aware of other times and lands, of birth far back, of lives in many stars. Now, this is a rendering of human love, and you can see it is the individual experience is extended to infinity suddenly, and the whole interpretation of it, so to say, is something that carries the line of what future might bring in poetry. You see, that's it. It is one of the forerunners, isn't it? And now you see that is the light which is penetrating into poetry. That absolutely individual experience, and yet the individual standing on his experience is able to expand it out into the whole of the infinity, able to contain the whole of the infinity in that one point of human experience. You see, this significance and rendering or interpretation of individual, absolutely individual experience in term of almost an infinite or a cosmic experience is this train that is coming. That's what he has been telling us, you see. Now here you see that this is, it is almost the physical love which he is rendering, you see, because he is speaking here of the, freshness stealing on me like a strange sleep. It's almost sensational, you see, but the sensation is immediately carried into the whispers and the shadows, and the sea has striven to say, and the winds have tried to utter but have uttered not. It's like a music heard before birth, and so on. You see, the images which come are full of cosmic significance and cosmic delight, which is finding expression, and the intensity that is bring about it, that it simply carries the spirit from this world to some other worlds altogether different. You see, of my birth, you see, yes, is from other worlds. You see, and then he says, beside thee, I am aware of other times and other lands. You see, almost he carries him back to his past life, where, as the suggestion is that perhaps he has known her before, you see, of other lands and other times, of birth far back, and lives in many stars. And it's written by a Christian who may not have believed, by Orthodox religion into past birth or future birth, you see. But in poetry, the spirit is carried away into a region where human limitation seems to come to a stop. You see, it doesn't seem to operate. That we see that. Now, where are we? Very distant human spirit, and then who is that?
And what did you just say, the last there?
Human limitation.
what you just said, excuse me, Purani, but what you just said about in poetry,
What did I say?
human limitation.
Yes, human limitations are overpassed. Limitations both of body, of mind and life, religious life, belief, and even the limitation of mind. Everything is overpassed, you see. And suddenly the spirit sees a truth which he is not trying to see by yoga, but he is coming to that which by a flash. It's by a flash, he is getting at it, you see. So that is afterwards, yes. Now, where is it? Now we might take up some of the modern people, isn't it? We have practically seen some of them, Yeats, A.E. Meredith and Stephen Phillips. So we take T.S. Eliot, one of the modern people, you see. Now if you take T.S. Eliot, where is T.S. Eliot here? Somewhere in the place of T.S. Eliot. Yet if you take T.S. Eliot, you come to some. Now, Eliot is one of the leaders of modern movement in poetry in English. He is an American, but he is naturalized English now. And he is living in England permanently almost. I think he has taken English citizenship, but he was an American. T.S. Eliot. He is not an Englishman, but he is now permanently in England and he is one of the leaders of English literary world. I mean, he was till yesterday. He is quite old now. T.S. Eliot. He went young to England and settled there practically afterwards. He has his poetry just after the First World War has taken shape, you see, and you find in it one of his works is Wasteland. You see, it's called Wasteland. Now, this wasteland, really speaking, is disillusionment of a generation. You see, the generation that followed the First World War and saw that everything was, that is a wasteland. Wasteland is suggestive title, I mean symbolic in the sense that he has given form to some of the most significant feelings of the times, you see. And the feeling was the feeling of frustration, isn't it? I mean, feeling of disillusionment, followed by an inferno, followed by the Second World War, in fact, you see, so it was terrific feeling. And this frustration, and not only frustration, but consciousness of frustration, you find, if a man is frustrated, he might, explode. He does not explode. It is a mind that sees that I am frustrated. You see, it's quite a different thing. It is a consciousness of frustration. Not only frustration, but consciousness of intellectual or mental consciousness of frustration in T.S. Eliot. And that is a subjective element. Sri Aurobindo has been saying that in poetry, subjective element will find more and more expression, isn't it? Well, here you find in T.S. Eliot a subjective element coming of mind detaching itself and watching the frustration of a full generation, and in the wasteland you find that expression. And also in his love poem, for instance, Prufrock. I don't know how they pronounce Prufrock. Prufrock, Dr. Prufrock, Prufrock. Prufrock. Love song of Prufrock. That is one of his famous early poems. It's now old poem, you see. But love poem of Prufrock at one day was revolutionary in the sense that it expressed, the most ridiculous condition of the human psychology in love. It is love song is that he is the attraction, and he's afraid of giving way to the attraction. This is the most wonderful thing about Prufrock. There is nothing very much deep about it, but it is subjective in the sense of the poetic intelligence watching the psychological movement of society. It is not merely one Prufrock that he is speaking about. He is speaking about the whole generation. That it is a vital feeling of attraction and a mental fear of giving way to that attraction, afraid of being subjected to the attraction. And two selves almost, you see, one that is liable to passion, and another is timid. You see, timidity and passion together. And it is almost coming to something like suppression of life by mind. You see, it is frustration of life by mind. Now, that you find in this song. Well, she gives there in Wasteland also broken images. Wasteland is not a continuous poem. You see, broken images. Because that represents the times, you see, he wanted to represent perhaps. And he finds that there is a make-believe in religion. You see, religious life is also not very marvelous. According to him, you know what he says? One of his poems is Hippopotamus. And he says, the hippopotamus's day is passed in sleep. At night he hunts. God works in a mysterious way. The church can sleep and feed at once. This is terrific, you know. You follow? The hippopotamus's day is passed in sleep. He feeds at night. At least he goes out and feeds at night. God works in mysterious ways, is the way. The church can sleep and feed at once. You see, the critical eye or critical mind trying to throw its light on situation and reading it. Well, you find an image which he creates is symbolically bizarre and queer, but it is very apt to the situation because it shows that even in the animal world there is some effort at gaining livelihood, you see. But here you find church doing nothing and eating at the same time. Yes. And he is, in the later period, you see, he has turned to faiths, you see, and I gave that quotation. Did I give you? When a stranger says, what is the meaning of this city? What will you answer? I think I quoted that, no?
What was the answer?
Hmm?
What was the answer?
What will you answer? That we dwell together to make money from each other?
Yes, yes.
Oh, this is a community.
Yes,
Now
yes.
there you find, you see the he doesn't give solution, and this is not a poetic expression, but it only brings forward in a very dry form, I must say, the question of the cultural values of current generation or modern generation. He brings forward this value that do you stay together each other to make money from each other? Well, in that case, he said that we are not worthy of the dignity of man. The psychological basis of collective life is lacking, according to him. You see, he is refuting the economic basis as worthy of man. It is not the material prosperity and animal comfort that can satisfy the need of a community, you see. And feeling of need of spiritual experience or spirituality in collective life also finds expression in him. But the expression is weighed down by intellectuality. He is one who is what you call, well, with a sophisticated intellect, you see, sophisticated mind or intellect. And so we build in vain unless the Lord build with us. This is right, but this is a prosaic expression. You see, we build in vain unless the Lord build with us. Shall we not bring the gifts to your service? Shall we not bring to your service all our powers for life, for dignity, grace, and order, and intellectual pleasures of the senses? And he is trying to invoke the human spirit into a kind of, possible connection between divine and the human. He's trying that very hard. In his later writings, particularly, this is in the beginning what he was writing, you see. And in some where even when he is full of faith, he is still bowed down by or cowed down by the sense of human, infirmity or human incapacity or human, you know, uh, inability to rise to anything too high for human, stature. He says, our gaze is submarine. Our eyes look upward and see the light that fractures through the waters. We see the light, but see not whence it comes. We see the light, but see not whence it comes. And then he says, in our rhythm of earthly life, we tire of light. We are glad when the day ends, when the play ends, and ecstasy is so much pain. We are children quickly tired. We almost, seem to take delight in human imperfection, incapacity to rise to anything divine or high. You will find by contrast some of the modern poets, Indian as well as English, who are daring in their, imagination and daring in their flight. And they believe that man could rise to this. But here you find this sophisticated mind is satisfied with human imperfections, and it will do enough if we can just we don't see from whence the light come, but you remember that it is the light that is our light. And you see, he calls it here the light invisible and light visible. That's how he puts it at the end. Visible and invisible, two worlds meet in man. Visible and invisible must meet in his temple. Light, the visible, reminder of the invisible light. Now, he's putting his faith into a kind of, a transformation has come to him by his life and so on. In his four quartets, which are his latest poems, you find this last strain coming up. There, in the four quartets, he expresses the bondage which man feels from endless sequence, chain of events, endless sequence of life, getting up, eating, sleeping, doing. You see, this escape from the endless sequence of chain, and he breaks it. Yes, into he wants to break out into not this chain, but something that is always present in eternity. You see, he wants to break out into something eternal, not only be subject to this constant, endless sequence and chain. And he feels in studies, how to say, in another sense, the time movement. You see, the rhythm of time. And he tries to get at the meaning of history. You see, what is the meaning of history? And he tries to find that in history we must try to read the relation of time to eternity. What is the relation of eternity and time? That would be the subject matter for looking at history. If you have a vision of history, well, the thing that one has to find or seek is the relation between time and eternity. And he views the endless cycles, you see, of history. Cyclic view, endlessly recurring succession. Birth, growth, decay, and death. Birth, growth, decay, and death. And stillness and rest are there in the center. All this is happening. Birth, growth, decay, and death. But in the midst of this movement, cyclic, constantly recurring, there is stillness and rest at the center. And the cyclic view should take, he says, if you take only the human, the history going into a recurring, movement only, past, present, and future, and so on, then you get into despair that it is constantly, because you don't see any significance. What's the meaning of this going round and round? It is going around and round. So if you look at it only at a cyclic view, a succession of births and growth and decay and death and so on, it will lead you to despair, because as human beings, you will be only, as he says in one of his poems, eating, drinking, dung and death. Yes, that's it. That is what you will perceive. And you see, that will not give any sense or significance to this movement of history. What is required is to escape into that which is permanent, to be still and still moving. You see, to be still and still moving. And in these poems, he also makes out that this movement of, if you get into this still movement and see what is real at the basis of this recurring movement of history and human life. History is a collective movement, individual life is again the same cyclic movement. You see, eating, drinking, drink and dung and death, and that is, birth, growth, decay, and death of the cultures of man. Well, if you see that, then you will have immediate apprehension of timeless reality. Then in the still center, you will see that there is a still center where an immediate apprehension of timeless reality will be felt in time. You see, this is his thesis. I am giving you roughly the analytical part and not the poetic part. But what he means to say in these four quartets is that there is an immediate apprehension of this time reality. You will feel it in time and you will remember it in time. Only, he says, this is not a movement that can be held. You can remember it, but you can't hold it. Now here you will find, if you compare his writing with Sri Aurobindo's writing, you will find a tremendous contrast. You see, that in his In Oris Eternum, for instance, Sri Aurobindo speaks of eternity in a moment of time. He several times has spoken in many of his poems, but In Oris Eternum is eternity in an hour, eternity in a second. In that poem, you will see that he speaks of eternity that can be held. In another poem also of his, I think it is the transformation of the senses, it is called Transformation. The another poem, sonnet called Transformation, you see. If you read his poem Transformation, you will find this claim that the experience of the infinite and eternal can be held by human consciousness, that it can become a part of man's consciousness. So just there you see the difference between two poets who express the same idea, that you can have apprehension of timeless reality, but you cannot hold it. Well, here is somebody says you can hold it. See? And about, he has also dreamt about earthly paradise. T.S. Eliot, he speaks of it in Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday. It is a sort of a, a sort of a, conception of perfect world conceived, and it is based on some legend. I don't know whether it was true or not, but it is said that in time of King James or somebody, I think it was King James's time, Charles or James, I think King Charles's time, there was a village, you see, and there people try actually to live out the Christian life. The whole community in the village, they lived the Christian life in the spirit and in the divine as the center of the life and so on. Well, that's a legend. Anyway, he has tried to render it back into a perfect earthly paradise, something like an earthly paradise. And he finds that modern man has thirst for water, for religious life, for spiritual life, but he is afraid of this need. That what is this need? Where will it lead me? This is one aspect which he brings out in some of his poems, T.S. Eliot, you see. T.S. Eliot brings out this, that need is felt by men, but there is a fear of, trying to satisfy it. it might prove, unquenchable. You might find that you cannot satisfy it, perhaps. T.S. Eliot brings out this, that need is felt by men, but there is a fear of, trying to satisfy it. It might prove, unquenchable. You might find that you cannot satisfy it, perhaps. Now, I think that general, exposition of T.S. Eliot is quite all right here. And we have done enough about T.S. Eliot, perhaps. There is a poem in which you see another poem by G.B. Walker. He is speaking about the relativity of mental knowledge or reason, you see. Herbert Reed also speaks about the limitation of human mind, and he is also referring to it in a different way. G.B. Walker says in one of his poems, seriously, there is no law of gravity with mental world. Seriously, there is no law of gravity with mental world. The mental world is upside down. You see, mental world is upside down. Gravity would be here if it was on the earth, then it would be gravity. But as it is upside down, there is no law of gravity. And all of us are hanging to it. All of us are hanging to it by anything strong enough to hold us to the mental world. And what can hold us we call real. And whatever weight tears out is unreal. You see? Yes, that's it. And what can hold us is always something that reaches out its hand to us. And education is the process of blindly groping for that hand. Now here you see, the poet is telling us that the idea that mind can give you a reality or a truth is not true. Mind is only giving you a relative truth for your own maintenance, for supporting you. Mind only extends to you a support. That's all that mind does. You see, you catch hold of a leather belt there and you hang on to it. If you can hang on, you say this is true. If it tears out, you say it is not true. That's all. Mind only extends a support to the human mind to go on. That's all. It's a relative support extended to meet your need. And he says that it is something that is always something that reaches out its hand to us. It is not an unconscious support that is extended. He goes further. The support that is extended to our mind or intellect from the mental world is not an unconscious support. It's a hand that is stretched out to support you. And when you say we give education or we want to educate, you miss that we are finding out the hand that will support the mind. That's all. Well, this is one of the prize poems, I think, of G.B. Walker. You see? Then you take C.D. Lewis, if you take. Now, C.D. Lewis is a big job because he's one of the most prominent writers in English poetry today. And you find that he has something in him which is very fine and satisfy the true concept of poetry. Even when it takes to a modern subject, he is able to keep to the true inspiration behind and bring something high. You see? For instance, it is a description of poetic passage. How does a poet create poetry? He speaks of it as, there is a dark room, the locked and shuttered womb. Locked and shuttered womb where negative is made positive. And another dark room, the blind, the bolted tomb, where positives change to negatives. There is a subconscious element in creation of poetry where the impression or the creative impulse is taken into the background in the dark room. It is the, shuttered womb, locked and shuttered womb where creation is prepared. And then where the negative is turned into positive and brought out. The poet only receives when the positive comes out. He doesn't know what has happened in between, you see. How it went in, what happened in the dark room, how it came out positive, not known. Only the positive is seen. The negative is sent in, the positive is received. Well, that is the a kind of mysterious process of poetic creation from the depth of the subconscious or subliminal or superconscient or inspiration or intuition, whatever it is a process for which to which the poet is not so, of which he is not conscious. Conception of man in this cosmic universe. You see the human personality and the place of ego, for instance, you find in him. It is very small, he says, and yet this self contains tides, continents and stars, a myriad selves. In this small human personality, one little man, he has within him tides. You see, you can, yes, there's floods of emotion or rage or passion or idea or idealism or impulse or aspiration, you see. Yet this self contains tides, continents and stars, a myriad selves, is small and solitary as one grass blade. Is small and solitary as one grass blade, passed over by the wind, amongst a myriad grasses on the prairie. That is man. See, just the Upanishads well said that, you see, it is a man grows like a blade of grass. Well, here he says, self contains tides, continents and stars. Has myriad selves. This one human individual has multiple individualities within him. But if you look at him from outside, well, he's small and solitary like one blade of grass. Man is not more than a blade of grass. Perhaps it is one interesting point in C.D. Lewis's his conception of love, you see. And if you contrast it with Sri Aurobindo's conception of love, you will find how, the two differ from one another, like two different worlds. And yet the poetic rendering of C.D. Lewis is quite nice. I mean, it is very fine, poetically beautiful rendering. But the vision of love which he has is weighed down by that human outlook, you see. Whereas Sri Aurobindo brings out that divine outlook or divine attitude towards the whole phenomenon of love and sees its fulfillment, on a different level altogether. That is different. Now, what he says here is, down hidden causeways of the universe, through space-time's cold, indifferent airs I strolled, a pointless star, till in my course I happened on a sun, and in a spurt of fire to her did run. That heavenly body as I neared began to make response, and heaved with fire at once. One wave of gathered heat overran her all and came to a head, a mountain based upon an ardent bed. You see, now his description of this meeting of two human beings is two stars. You see a pointless star coming in the orbit of a sun and rushing to the, you see, that's the description. It's very fine and poetic and almost showing how unaccountable, or you can say mysterious, or almost, something that irresistibly mysterious is the process of love, or the element of human love in human life. And then this leads into, you see, the procreation. And then he says, it is to perpetuate man's labor. When one gets children, it is only perpetuation of the labor of man towards perfection or towards some goal. But it was not intellectual, you see. As he says, how he speaks about this procreation. He says, This was not the mind's understanding. The mind did not understand that it was going to perpetuate human labor, you see. This was not the mind's understanding, but as outrageous heat breaking in thunder across the hills sweetens our aching dust. The process of procreation was not intellectually clear and undertaken with a sense of responsibility that it was to perpetuate man's labor. No. It was, as he says, not the mind's understanding, but outrageous heat breaking in thunder across hills sweetens our aching dust. The helplessness and ecstasy of the human being in face of the impulse to procreate, you see, the sex impulse. And he is trying to argue afterwards, you see, in the same poem further up, that reason is a weak reed. You cannot depend upon reason. Is a thin from thin air reason issues, he says. We live on living earth, whose trees enlarge their fruit without misgiving or excuse. We live on living earth, whose trees enlarge their fruit without misgiving or excuse. Space spanned, God girdled, love will keep its form, being planned of bone. It is planted in the bone. Now here you will find that he is equating the impulse of procreation with the impulse of love. That's one. And secondly, he is trying to plead that as in nature, the impulse is spontaneous and without effort, without misgiving or excuse, so should it be in human life. Now, this is falsified by actual conditions of life today because mind is actually trying to govern the process of procreation. He is pleading that to the human being, but human being has ceased to be natural. He has ceased to be like the tree and the animal. What is to be done? You see, he is right in saying that in nature you don't quite right. But in actual condition you find that it is not so. And that is exactly where you find limitation. I mean, how the poetic side, though finely expressed in beautiful poetry, I mean, as poetry there is nothing to say. But as a perception of a reality, well, one has to say that the perception of reality by poet here is not proved by life, is not carried out by life. Here, he speaks in another poem of love as you know, land's end. We have come to the land's end, he says. He speaks at another poem of love as we have come to the land's end. And then he comes to the process of agriculture and sowing and the what you call the record. You see there you will find, if you compare Savitri, the difference between a seer and a very fine inspired poet. You see, then you will find that he says in that poem, the tree grips the soil. The bird knows how to use the wind, but the full man must live, rooted yet unconfined. Now, the bird, grips the soil and soars high. The bird knows how to use the wind. The full man must live rooted yet unconfined. Well, he is pleading that man must have a firm basis and yet must be unconfined. This is the cry. That is the poem which I quoted to the boys in the Valley Valley School also, you see. To fly like a bird and to settle like a bird. In another poem he says like that. You see, the impulse is to always to start anew and yet to settle like a bird, you see. Well, that is the double instinct in man, double process of the attraction. that, really speaking, brings in the idea or the problem of eternity and time movement. You see, it is eternity and time movement, or human personality and the essential divinity behind him. But of course, you don't expect C.D. Lewis to go to that. You see. He has another fine poem called The Magnetic Mountain. It's one of his very fine poems, you see, and in that poem, he is trying to show the limits of reason also. You find here that he is able to rise to this. What is that poem also? Yes. Somewhere beyond the railheads of reason, south or north, somewhere beyond the railheads of reason, south or north, lies a magnetic mountain riveting sky to earth. A magnetic mountain riveting sky to earth. Ideal and earth, you see, the earthly life and the ideal, yes. No line is laid so far, ties rusting in a stack, and sleepers, dead men's bones, mark a defeated track. If you want to go to the magnetic mountain, no line is laid so far, and ties are rusting in a stack. All that is stacked up. And sleepers are there, dead men's bones, will mark a defeated track. But the magnetic mountain is there, somewhere beyond the railheads of reason. He's already feeling something supra-rational, you see. But the difficulties of the approach, there is no road laid down to it, you see, and it's yet a defeated track. But it is something that rivets sky to earth. How will you reach there, he says? Iron in the soul. Iron in the soul. Spirit steeled in fire. Needle trembling on truth. These shall draw me there. There is no road laid out, but you can be drawn to it by if you have iron in the soul. Now, iron is a symbol of suffering and pain, you know that. Iron in the heart, they will say. Iron is something that goes deep into your heart, and something that makes you feel that you must. If there is iron, you will be attracted by the magnetic mountain, isn't it? I mean, magnet is always attracts the iron. So if you have iron in the soul, spirit steeled in fire. If the steel, if your whole spirit is steeled by the fire of life, some fire of aspiration, some fire of a will to do something great, you'll be attracted by the magnetic mountain. It is, his perception of man's dream of perfection. But he has given such a solid and concrete image that it becomes, tangible and real to the perception and to the mind. Needle trembling on truth. When needle of the heart is trying to balance itself on truth, these shall draw me there, you see, trying to find out the truth. Like a magnetic needle, you see, the magnetic needle is put, it will always put over the magnet, you see. Yeah. Yes. Or how can you know it? Kestrel who yearly changes its tenement of space. Kestrel is a bird, that powerful bird that is like it's not exactly like a eagle, but some kind of eagle. You see, kestrel is a kind of bird which is very powerful and strong. Kestrel who yearly changes his tenement of space. At the last, hovering may signify that space. When he hovers intuitively at a place, your spirit, kestrel is a symbol of the spirit of man. When the inmost soul of man hovers, he may signify that place intuitively as to where is the magnetic mountain. You may come to it intuitively. Near the magnetic mountain, compass and clock must fail. because they are made of iron. So you don't try to see whether you are right or wrong, how much time it will take to realize your ideal. You see? Yes. This is the, yes. Near the magnet, divine is the magnetic mountain, really speaking. My interpretation is it stands for the divine. His idea is that perhaps it stands for communism. I don't know what he wanted. You see, I don't object to his own interpretation, but mine is equally correct and more correct perhaps than his. Near the magnetic mountain, compass and clock must fail. You should not take count of time when you are after the infinite and the divine. And you shouldn't have a compass to all the time take bearing because it won't work. Now you are near the magnetic mountain. For space stands on its head there and time chases its tail. Time chases its tail. Space stands on its head there, and time chases its tail. It is a rich mountain. It is not that your magnetic mountain is full of stone. No. There is ore, iron for the asking. Get as much iron as you like. We'll keep all winds at bay. No wind will come and shake that mountain. Girders to take the leaden strain of a sagging sky. You see? There is iron for the asking. You get as much iron as you like there. And we'll keep all winds at bay. There will be no storms there when you reach the magnetic mountain. Keep all winds at bay. Girders to take the leaden strain of a sagging sky. The whole sky, when it's dropping, you got girders to take the strain of the sky. You will be able to maintain any human catastrophe or any natural phenomena that can come to disturb you. You can prevent by the girdle. Oh, there is a mine of metal enough to make me rich. If I go there, there is enough mine of metal to make me rich. And build right over chaos a cantilever bridge. We can build a bridge, cantilever bridge across, yes, over chaos. So you can bring cosmos into existence by reaching the magnetic mountain. Well, this is the truth or reality beyond mind, conceived by man, but concrete, capable of attracting man. And if man could reach, well, it is that which solves all his problem. Well, it can stand for the divine reality equally and better than any perfection conceived of human being collectively or of society or of nations or any outer perfection. It's really the attraction of the inner being. Now, that is a characteristic poem of his, which you find that, you see, there are one or two poems of his to which I would like to draw attention, but time is too short and I don't know whether, perhaps it's better to take up tomorrow. C.D. Lewis.
Ronnie, would you say when you were talking about Wasteland and T.S. Eliot, he doesn't explode, he has such an intellectual awareness of
Yes,
frustration.
too much awake.
Well, would you call that the witness consciousness?
You can say yes. In the mind, witness consciousness is in the mind. Yes, detachment. That he has. That's certainly a good
in the cathedral.
Yes.
But I saw it in a little theater where we just sat around and they had a little platform on the floor.
Mm.
But I missed seeing it.
It is written by T.S. Eliot, is it not? Yes.
I missed seeing it. They gave the play there, and the man who took the part, the Archbishop of Canterbury, had a magnificent presence, and a beautiful, absolutely glorious voice. And but I thought it seemed to go right back to the Bible and Shakespeare, every other line. The four characters that were brought in at the last just tore down the magnificence that had been created, but I may be wrong. That's just my.
What did they do?
Well, I can't remember what they said. They justified themselves, each one, the four murderers, all justified themselves. This man was taking money from the poor who were laboring for their bread, like the hippopotamus. And they told them they were knights. They were bearing the burdens of society. The king had told them that if this man was allowed to function, he would usurp and so on. I mean, that was the gist. Both he and Ezra Hahn, who were so very sophisticated, both of them went back to the deepest and richest sources in English literature. Ezra Hahn went back to the Italian Renaissance
Yes,
and
yes.
Chinese, Shakespeare and the Bible, the King James Version.
Yeah, he's a Catholic, I think.
Both
Yes,
got
he did.
tired of their dead
Yeah,
bones.
he's a Catholic.
He's a Catholic,
Yeah.
I think. T.S. Eliot is a Catholic, I think.
Horrible looking person.
Yes, yes, he's abnormal little, I think, and his poetry also is there are brilliant parts, but you compare when you compare him with of this Odyssey, then you. But whether it signifies anything, I don't know. A writer of a long or epic poem has failed, but is a brilliant exponent of some aspect of expression of modern spirit. Also, is a very good very often. And there are brilliant passages and lines which you can say elegance or sustained. Oh, yes.
Still and still
There
moving.
are not only that, man speaks. The avatar, according to him, is of the avatar. He says it is the meaning or hint half guessed, the gift half understood, is the avatar incarnation. The divine incarnates, but incarnation is the eternal, you see, the eternal coming in time. And therefore he says the meaning or hint half guessed or gift half understood is the incarnation.